All right, guys, in lesson 6, we're going to talk about quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is a second degree equation of the form ax squared bx plus c. So ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, so there's several different ways that we can factor this or figure out what x equals. And so we're going to walk through each of these. The first one is the zero factor property, which is probably something that would probably you'd be most familiar with. You're just factoring here. So x minus 5x plus 6, that's going to give you x minus 2 and 3. And a zero factor property says I'm going to take each of these parentheses and set it equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. And so you get x equals 2, x equals 3. And so your zeros for this, or your solutions to this, it goes either way, zeros or solutions. All right, it's going to be x equals 2, x equals 3. On number 2, the first thing you want to do, if it's not already, is get everything to the same side. So you got negative 4x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Now, we also want that first term to be positive. So I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1. So this is going to be 4x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. Now, you could have also solved for this by just moving everything to the right first and foremost. But it's a preference thing, really. So at this point, I don't have a GCF, so I'm going to have to do the AC method. And again, I got the A, I got the C, so I'm going to take the A and multiply by the C. All right, so this is going to be x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. Factor that. X plus minus 4 and 3. And because the middle term is negative, it's going to be minus 4 and plus 3. Divide each one by 4 because you multiply by 4. Simplify your fractions, so you got x plus 3/4, and you got x minus 1. Now, and if we were just factoring, I would take that denominator of 4 and kick it in front of the x, but I'm setting each of these parentheses equal to 0, so I'm just going to go straight to that. Equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, and that means x equals negative 3/4, and x equals 1. And so those are my answers. On 3, this is the difference of two squares. So the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 100 is 10, so it's going to be x plus 10, x minus 10 equals 0. And so that's going to be x plus 10 equals 0, x minus 10 equals 0. And so x equals negative 10, x equals positive 10. And those are my choices. Those are my answers. Now, another way of doing this is the square root property. It doesn't work all the time, but it does help out in a situation like this. This is the same problem we worked before, so we know what the answer is going to be. But if I, instead of factoring, just move that 100 over, that's x squared equals 100. And then I can take the square root of both sides, and you get x equals plus or minus 10. And we do plus or minus because positive 10 all squared is 100 and negative 10 all squared is 100. So you have to consider both solutions. And so once again, we knew what our answer was going to be from the jump, but it's a different way of working it. On 5, you could take the square root of both sides. And now that we know how to take the square root of a negative, this is going to be x equals plus or minus 9i. Square root of 81 is 9. Square root of negative 1 is I, so plus or minus 9i. All right. This binomial is squared. I can still use the square root property and take the square root of both sides. All right, so this is going to be 5x minus 3. The square and the square root cancel each other out, so I drop the parentheses. And then this is going to be I squared of 3, plus or minus. All right, so now I just get x by itself. 5x equals 3 plus or minus I squared of 3. And then divide everything by 5. X equals 3 plus or minus I squared of 3 all over 5. And so that would be my answer here. All right. Now, another way to do this is completing the square. And the square part comes from, so if I were to write this 5x minus 3 twice, that's your square we're talking about. I want that square to show up. And so here's what I'm going to do. All right, remember, this is A, this is B, and this is C. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say x squared minus 2x plus, or let's leave some space, equals, and move that C over. All right, now I'm going to take the B term, which is negative 2, divide it by 2, and square it. Okay, so negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. If you square it, you get plus 1. And whatever you do to one side, you do the other. Well, this allows you to get x minus 1 and 1 equals 3. All right, which says x minus 1 all squared equals 3. And then from here, you could do the square root property. So once again, this was the square I was trying to get to show up, and that's how you do it. All right, so taking the square root of both sides, you get x minus 1 equals the square root of 3 plus or minus x equals 1 plus or minus square root of 3. And that's your answer. On 8, the first thing we want to do is, in order to do this, completing the square stuff the right way, we want to make sure that leading term is positive 1. So what we're going to do here is we're going to divide everything by negative 2. And that's going to give us x squared minus 2x minus 3 halves equals 0. So you get x squared minus 2x equals 3 halves. Okay, so we already did it from the previous problem, so this is going to be plus 1 plus 1. I know this is going to be x minus 1 all squared equals 3 halves plus 1 is going to be 5 halves. All right, so it takes the square root of both sides. All right, so it's going to be x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root of 5 halves. And so here's what we do. We add the 1, x equals 1 plus or minus square root of 5 halves. And there you go. Now, if all else fails, we can always use the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so remember we have we get everything to the same side. We got x squared minus 6x plus 7 equals 0. And then this is a, this is b, this is c. And then we just set up our formula. So x equals b, opposite b, so negative 6 is going to be positive 6 plus or minus square root b squared, that's 36 minus 4 times 1 times 7 all over 2a. A is 1, so it's just 2. All right, so 6 plus or minus 4 times 7 is 28. 36 minus 28 is 8. So 6 plus square root of 8 all over 2. Now we can simplify the square root of 8, and so that's going to be 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 over 2. And then I can simplify, reduce this. I can reduce this, so that'd be 3 plus or minus square root of 2. And that would be my answer. So this works every time. If factoring doesn't work, if completing the square doesn't work, like factoring or doing the quadratic formula works every time with quadratic equations. So earlier, I wanted that first number to be positive 1, and so I divided. Here, I have fractions. So I take what would be my common denominator, and I multiply the whole thing. So half of 4 is 2, so I got 2x squared plus 1/4 of 4 is, or 4 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 1 is 1, so you got x minus 3 equals, 4 times 3 is 12 equals 0. Now, I'm not trying to do complete and square or anything, so I can leave it like it is. And I just set up my quadratic formula. So this is going to be opposite b, so -1 plus or minus square root. B squared is 1 minus 4 AC, so 2 and -12 all over 2a. 2a is 2, so that's 2 times 2. Let's see, -1 plus or minus square root. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 12 is 96, so it's going to be square root of 97 all over 4. And you can't break 97 down any further, so this is my answer. On 11, you're going to have to multiply this out first and then get the 16 over. So that's going to be x squared minus x minus 9x plus 9 minus, or plus 16 equals 0. X squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. Okay, so you could factor this, or you could do quadratic formula. So this is going to be x equals 10 plus or minus square root 100 minus 4 times 1 times 25 all over 2a, so it's just 2. 4 times 25 is 100, so that's going to be 0 underneath. 10 plus or minus square root of 0 over 2. So that's going to be 10 over 2, which is just 5. All right, because the square root was 0, the plus or minus fell out. And there you go. All right, last thing we want to talk about in this section is the discriminant, which is that b squared minus 4ac. So here's what you need to look out for. B squared minus 4ac, that's your discriminant. If it's greater than 0, you end up with 2 x-intercepts. If it's equal to 0, you end up with 1 x-intercept. And if it's less than 0, you have no x-intercepts. All right, so we're going to find out what the discriminant is and determine how many intercepts that we have. All right, so remember, this is A, this is B, this is C. All right, so b squared minus 4ac, so that's going to be -8 all squared minus 4 times 1 times 16. And we're going to figure out what that equals. So it's going to be 64 minus 64, which is 0, which means I have 1 x-intercept. On 13, I need to get everything to the same side. 4x squared plus 6x minus 3 equals 0. All right, b squared, that's going to be 36 minus 4 times -3. All right, that's going to be 36 minus, all right, 4 times 4 is 16 times 3 is 48. If the 3 is negative, so it's going to be plus 48. All right, so it's going to be 84. And since it's greater than 0, I'm going to have 2 x-intercepts. All right, so that's the discriminant. That's it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.